The rebirth and the divorce papers. Shen Yichen felt a sharp pain shoot through her skull as she gasped awake. The weight in her chest was unbearable, suffocating her with memories of her last moments. The betrayal, the divorce, the cold indifference in Lu Shenyuan's eyes as he stood beside Bai Yue, the woman he had always loved. She had signed the papers with trembling hands, hoping in some deluded way that he would stop her, that he would say she was irreplaceable. But he hadn't. Instead, he had smiled at Bai Yue, whispering words of love in the same room where he had once made his vows to Shen Yichen. And then came the accident, a tragic, ironic end. But she was alive. The rich scent of sandalwood, the familiar warmth of a luxurious bed, it all felt eerily recognizable. She turned her head and saw the grand bedroom, the one she had shared with Lu Shenyuan for 5 long years. Her breath hitched. She knew this place, but she had died. Yichen's hands trembled as she reached for the phone on the nightstand. The date burned into her mind like a cruel joke. February 14th, the day he handed her the divorce papers. Her heart pounded. Rebirth? Was this real? Her fingers clenched the silk sheets beneath her. In her past life, today had been the beginning of her downfall. The day she had cried, begged, and humiliated herself for a man who had never loved her. Not this time. A knock sounded at the door, making her head snap up. A deep, familiar voice called out, one that once sent her heart racing. "Yichen, wake up. We need to talk." Lu Shenyuan. The sound of his voice, once the center of her world, now sent a cold, seething fury through her veins. She took a deep breath. This time, I won't be pathetic. This time, I will walk away first. The door opened and Lu Shenyuan stepped inside, dressed in his usual immaculate suit. He was as handsome as ever, his sculpted features sharp and refined. But now, Shen Yichen saw past the illusion. His eyes, once a source of comfort, were nothing but cold. He held out an envelope, the same divorce papers as before. "Sign these," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll make sure you're well compensated." In her past life, she had choked back tears and asked, why? This time, she took the envelope, opened it calmly, and pulled out the pen lying beside her. Lu Shenyuan frowned slightly. "Shen Yichen?" Without hesitation, she scrawled her signature across the paper in bold, unshaken strokes. Lu Shenyuan's eyes narrowed. "You're not going to ask questions?" Yichen chuckled lightly. "This is a joke, right? Was this the same man she had once thrown away her dignity for?" "Why would I?" she said smoothly, placing the signed document back into his hands. "You want a divorce? I'll give it to you. I'm not interested in being an unwanted wife." Lu Shenyuan's expression shifted. His lips parted slightly, as if to say something, but nothing came out. Bai Yue had once accused her of being a woman who clung onto men desperately. She had spent her past life proving them right, but now she would prove them wrong. She smiled, graceful and detached. "If there's nothing else, I'd like to pack my things." She stood, her silky nightgown flowing around her as she walked past Lu Shenyuan. Her scent, once a comfort to him, now felt distant. She wasn't looking at him the same way. There was no sadness, no longing, only indifference. And for the first time, an uncomfortable feeling crawled under his skin. An unexpected departure. The household staff watched in stunned silence as Shen Yichen carried her suitcases down the grand staircase. No crying, no pleading, no scene. In her past life, she had spent hours arguing, trying to make Lu Shenyuan stay. Today, she was the first to leave. Even the servants exchanged confused glances. Everyone had expected a drama. Instead, the madam had simply walked away. Lu Shenyuan stood at the top of the stairs, watching as she stepped into the car, her posture straight and poised. She never once looked back. A strange, hollow feeling settled in his chest. This isn't how it was supposed to go. A new beginning. The moment she closed the car door, Shen Yichen exhaled, feeling years of pain lift from her shoulders. This time, I will live for myself. She stared out the window, watching the mansion shrink in the distance. It was the place she had poured all her love into, only to be discarded like an afterthought. Not anymore. A message from an unknown number popped up on her phone. Mo Chen, you're finally free. I've been waiting. Shen Yichen's fingers hovered over the screen, her heart skipping a beat. Mo Chen, the man who had once loved her in silence. The man who, in her past life, had watched her suffer from afar. The one she had been too blind to see. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her lips. Let the second life begin. Meanwhile, Lu Shenyuan sat in his office, staring at the signed divorce papers in his hand. It should have been satisfying. It wasn't. Something felt off. It gnawed at him, unfamiliar and unsettling. He had spent years believing Yichen loved him too much to ever leave, that she would cry, beg, resist. Instead, she had walked away without hesitation. For some reason, he couldn't let go of the way she had looked at him, like he was nothing. And for the first time, Lu Shenyuan felt something he never had before. Regret. A woman no longer in love. A silent storm in the Lu household. The quiet in the Lu mansion was deafening. Lu Shenyuan sat in his study, fingers lightly pressing against his temples. A bottle of untouched whiskey sat on his desk, the amber liquid catching the dim lighting. He hadn't touched it, not because he wasn't in the mood, but because his mind was restless. The divorce papers lay on the table, signed so effortlessly by Shen Yichen's delicate hand. It was the first time something hadn't gone as he expected. He had assumed she would fight him, cry, demand answers, like she did in the past. But instead, she had walked away without hesitation, without a second glance, and that unsettled him. The phone on his desk buzzed. Bai Yue. Shen Yuan, are you finally free now? Let's celebrate. He stared at the message for a long time. Once he would have responded immediately, but right now, he couldn't find the enthusiasm. For the first time, Bai Yue's words felt like noise. The first taste of freedom. Shen Yichen leaned back against the leather seat of her car, the city lights flickering through the tinted windows. Freedom. It tasted nothing like she had imagined. It was lighter, like the crisp air after a storm. Her phone buzzed again. Mo Chen, where are you? Let's meet. She smirked. Mo Chen, her old friend, the one she had neglected in her past life while she had been busy chasing a loveless marriage. This time, she wouldn't be so blind. Take me to the Dynasty Lounge, she told the driver. If she was going to restart her life, she was going to do it her way. An encounter that shouldn't have happened. Inside the Dynasty Lounge, the air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and quiet conversations between business elites. Shen Yichen walked in, her posture straight, exuding confidence. Heads turned as she passed, some in surprise, others in admiration. She had always been beautiful, but something about her had changed. Mo Chen was already waiting in a private booth. His sharp features softened when he saw her. "You look different," he commented, sliding a glass of wine toward her. "I feel different," she replied, raising her glass. She was about to take a sip when a voice interrupted them. A voice she never wanted to hear again. "Yichen?" She turned, her grip tightening around the glass. Lu Shenyuan, her ex-husband. His eyes flickered with something unreadable as he took her in. The stunning dress that hugged her curves, the light smile on her lips, the way she exuded confidence in a way she never had before. His gaze darkened when he saw Mo Chen sitting beside her. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice polite, distant. Lu Shenyuan hesitated. He didn't know why he was here. He had come for a business meeting, but now that he saw her sitting with another man, an unfamiliar irritation surged within him. He frowned. "Should I be asking you the same question? This isn't your kind of place." She tilted her head, her smile deepening. "And what exactly is my kind of place, Mr. Lu?" Mo Chen chuckled beside her, sensing the tension. "Yichen is free to go wherever she wants now. You no longer have a say." Lu Shenyuan's jaw tightened. Something about hearing those words, "no longer have a say," felt unsettling, unacceptable. In the past, Shen Yichen had never gone to places like this without him. She had always waited at home, always obedient. But now, she was smiling at another man. Something inside him twisted. "Enjoy your night," she said smoothly, taking Mo Chen's arm. "I know I will." And just like that, she walked away, leaving Lu Shenyuan standing in the middle of the lounge, staring after her. For the first time, it dawned on him. She wasn't his anymore. Regret begins to set in. Back in his car, Lu Shenyuan stared out the window, his fingers tapping against his knee. Why was he feeling this way? Hadn't he wanted this? The divorce? His freedom? Bai Yue? Then why did he feel so empty? His mind replayed the way Shen Yichen had looked at him tonight. Not with love, not with sadness, but with indifference. And that bothered him. A lot. His phone buzzed again. "Bai Yue, are you still coming?" He closed his eyes, exhaling heavily. For the first time, he didn't want to. Meanwhile, at Mo Chen's apartment. "You're really doing it, huh?" Mo Chen leaned against the balcony railing, watching Shen Yichen sip her wine. "You're really walking away from him." She smirked, setting the glass down. "It's not walking away if I was never really wanted." Mo Chen studied her carefully. "And if he comes back?" She laughed. "Then I'll make sure he regrets ever letting me go." And for the first time, she truly believed it. Let Lu Shenyuan regret. She had no intention of turning back. The ex-husband's first signs of madness. A restless night in the Lu mansion. Lu Shenyuan sat in the dimly lit study, his fingers gripping a cigarette he hadn't even realized he lit. The air was thick with the scent of tobacco, the smoke curling around the untouched glass of whiskey on his desk. He hadn't been able to sleep. Since the divorce, he had expected relief, freedom. After all, wasn't that what he wanted? Then why did everything feel wrong? His mind kept returning to the Dynasty Lounge, to Shen Yichen, the way she had smiled, but not at him. The way she had walked away without hesitation, the way she had looked at Mo Chen. His jaw clenched. Mo Chen. He had always known about Mo Chen's feelings for Shen Yichen, but in the past, it hadn't mattered. She had been his wife. Mo Chen had never been a threat, but now she was free. And worse, she seemed happy. The realization made something dark stir in his chest. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. "Come in." Bai Yue stepped inside, her delicate figure outlined in the soft glow of the study lamp. She was dressed in a silk nightgown, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. "Shen Yuan," she murmured, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "You've been distant lately." Lu Shen Yuan exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. "It's just work." Bai Yue hesitated before stepping closer, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of his desk. "Are you regretting it?" she asked quietly. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Regretting what?" "The divorce." A sharp silence filled the room. Lu Shenyuan's gaze darkened. "Don't be ridiculous. This is what I wanted." Bai Yue smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She had seen it, the way he had looked at Shen Yichen in the lounge, the way his entire demeanor had shifted the moment he saw her with another man. And that terrified her. Because for the first time, she saw it. Lu Shenyuan wasn't as free as he thought, a woman who no longer cared. Meanwhile, Shen Yichen was having the best sleep of her life. No nightmares, no pain, no Lu Shenyuan. When she woke up, the morning sunlight poured through the large windows of her new apartment. She stretched, feeling an unfamiliar lightness in her chest. Freedom. She had expected it to feel lonely, but instead, it felt peaceful. A notification pinged on her phone. "Mo Chen, have breakfast with me?" She smirked and quickly replied, "Only if you're paying." After getting ready, she stepped out of her apartment, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The past Shen Yichen had waited around for love that never existed. The present Shen Yichen? She had better things to do. The growing obsession. Lu Shenyuan found himself outside of Shen Yichen's new apartment. He didn't know how he had ended up here. His body had moved on its own. She had left so easily. Too easily. It didn't make sense. The Shen Yichen he knew should have fought, should have clung to him. She should have cried, begged. But instead, she had smiled at another man. The thought sent a sharp, unexplainable irritation through him. He watched as the front doors opened. Shen Yichen stepped out. Lu Shenyuan's breath caught. She was radiant, dressed in a fitted white dress that accentuated her slender figure, her long hair flowing in loose waves. She looked completely different from the quiet, obedient wife he had once known. And then, Mo Chen appeared beside her, laughing, talking. His blood boiled. Shen Yichen had once only smiled like that for him. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. "Yichen." She froze at the familiar voice. Slowly, she turned around, her expression blank. "Mr. Lu." His chest tightened. Mr. Lu? Not Shen Yuan, not even ex-husband. Just a polite, distant Mr. Lu. "You..." He struggled to find the words. "You moved out so quickly." She raised an eyebrow. Wasn't that the point of the divorce? Lu Shenyuan's jaw clenched. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "Where are you going?" he found himself asking. Shen Yichen tilted her head. "Do I need to report my schedule to you, Mr. Lu?" Mo Chen chuckled beside her. Relax, Lu Shenyuan. We're just getting breakfast. Lu Shenyuan's hands curled into fists. Mo Chen. Always Mo Chen. His chest felt tight as he watched her walk away, without hesitation, without looking back. And for the first time, he realized something terrifying. He was the one left behind. Desperation creeps in. Lu Shenyuan sat in his office, his mind restless. The more he thought about Shen Yiqin, the more unsettled he became. He had always believed that she would wait for him, that no matter what, she would always be there. But now she wasn't. A thought struck him. Was she seeing someone? His grip tightened around his pen. Number he wouldn't allow it. She was his. Even if he had been the one to let her go, even if he had been the one to ask for the divorce, she was still his. His chest ached with an unfamiliar emotion. Was this regret? His phone buzzed. Assistant. Sir, should I investigate Madame Shen's movements? He hesitated. For a brief moment, he thought about deleting the message, about letting her go. But then he typed back. Find out who she's been meeting. As he set his phone down, a bitter realization settled in his chest. For the first time, he was the one chasing her. An unwelcome discovery. Lu Shenyuan sat at his desk, the weight of a growing obsession pressing down on him. His assistant had just sent him a report, a detailed account of Shen Yiqin's movements since their divorce. He should have ignored it, should have thrown the folder away. But he couldn't. His fingers tightened around the pages as his eyes scanned the words. She had gone to a high-end restaurant with Mo Chen. She had been seen at a charity gala, wearing a dress that had made her the center of attention. She had turned down a lucrative business offer from the Liu family's connections. And worst of all, she had smiled in every single photo attached. She was thriving, without him. Lu Shenyuan's grip on the pages tightened. This wasn't right. In his mind, she had always been fragile, soft-spoken, dependent on him. The woman in these reports, she was nothing like the Shen Yiqin he had known. No, he hadn't known her at all, had he? A bitter taste filled his mouth. His phone rang. Bai Yue. He let it ring until it stopped. For the first time, Bai Yue's voice annoyed him. She wasn't the one occupying his thoughts. Shen Yiqin's newfound freedom. Meanwhile, Shen Yiqin stepped out of the elevator, adjusting the hem of her blazer. She had just finished a successful business meeting, one that, in her past life, she would have never had the confidence to attend alone. This time, she walked out with her head held high. She was done being the woman in the shadows. Yiqin. She turned and found Mo Chen leaning against the wall, watching her with an amused expression. Done impressing the business world, he teased. She smirked. Not yet. But I'm getting there. Mo Chen's eyes darkened slightly as he studied her. You know, I always knew you had it in you. She raised an eyebrow. Oh? Then why didn't you tell me? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Because you were too busy chasing someone who didn't deserve you. The words made her pause. Yes, she had wasted too much time, but no more. Mo Chen hesitated before asking, what if he comes back? Shen Yiqin's smile didn't falter. Then he'll learn what it feels like to be ignored. And she meant it. The first signs of madness. Lu Shenyuan found himself parked outside Shen Yiqin's apartment. He shouldn't be here, but he couldn't stop himself. The moment he saw her stepping out of the building, with Mo Chen at her side, something in him snapped. She was his. How could she be smiling at another man so soon after their divorce? How could she look so free when he felt like he was unraveling? Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. Yichen. Shen Yichen turned, her eyes flickering with surprise for only a moment before turning cold. Her voice was calm, distant. Mr. Liu, that name again. It sent a sharp pang through his chest. She had once called him Shen Yuan with such affection. Now, it was as if he were just another stranger. Mo Chen glanced between them, his expression unreadable. Something you need, Liu Shenyuan? Liu Shenyuan ignored him. His eyes were locked onto Shen Yichen. Can we talk? He asked, his voice lower than he intended. Shen Yichen tilted her head, studying him for a long moment before answering. About what? We have nothing to discuss. Liu Shenyuan felt his patience slipping. You moved on too quickly. She let out a quiet laugh, soft, but filled with amusement. Excuse me? You... His jaw clenched. You didn't even hesitate. Her expression didn't change. And why should I have? Liu Shenyuan felt like he had been slapped. She wasn't supposed to say that. She was supposed to miss him. Instead, she looked at him as if he was nothing more than a memory. His fingers twitched. Before he could form another sentence, Shen Yichen turned away. Mo Chen, she said, linking her arm through his. We should go. We have a reservation. She didn't even wait for a response. She just walked away. And Liu Shenyuan was left standing there, watching, feeling something he had never felt before. Regret. And something darker. Obsession. A breaking point approaches. Liu Shenyuan sat in his office, gripping his whiskey glass so tightly that it threatened to shatter. He had spent years thinking he had Shen Yichen under his control, that she would always be there, waiting, longing for even a fraction of his attention. But now she wasn't. She had erased him from her life so easily. And he couldn't do the same. His phone buzzed. It was Bai Yue again. With a frustrated sigh, he finally answered. Shen Yuan. Bai Yue's voice was sweet, but there was an edge of nervousness. You haven't called me in days. He closed his eyes. He didn't care. Not about Bai Yue. Not anymore. Shen Yuan? I'm busy, he said coldly. Bai Yue's voice wavered. Are you thinking about her? He didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. Yes. And he wasn't going to stop. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, he was losing control. And he hated it. The descent into madness. Losing control. Liu Shenyuan sat in his office, the city skyline stretching before him. His hands were clenched into fists, his mind consumed by a single thought. Shen Yichen was slipping away. Ever since the divorce, she had walked through life as if he had never existed. She smiled for others, thrived in the business world, and worst of all, stood by Mo Chen's side. The reports from his assistant told him everything. She wasn't just seeing Mo Chen casually. They were attending events together. She was allowing him close. Too close. A deep rage simmered within him. He had let her go. Yes. But she wasn't supposed to move on so quickly. She wasn't supposed to forget him. The sound of his office door opening pulled him from his thoughts. Bai Yue stepped inside, her face carefully composed, but her eyes searching. "Shen Yuan," she said softly, "you're distracted." He didn't respond. Bai Yue's fingers tightened at her sides. "It's her, isn't it?" Lu Shenyuan exhaled sharply. "Bai Yue, I don't have time for this." "She's making a fool of you," Bai Yue snapped, her mask of gentleness cracking. "She's flaunting herself in front of everyone. Have you seen the headlines? Shen Yichen's glow up after divorce? Shen Yichen and Mo Chen, the power couple in the making." The words grated against his nerves. He had seen them, every single one. But hearing them from Bai Yue's mouth only fueled his frustration. Bai Yue stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You said you wanted freedom. I gave up everything for you. And now you're acting like..." His cold glare silenced her. "Like what?" "Like you regret it." Lu Shenyuan didn't answer. Because he did, and that terrified him. An unwanted confrontation. Shen Yichen adjusted her bracelet as she walked into an exclusive charity auction, her posture poised, her expression calm. Mo Chen walked beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance. "I feel like I should warn you," he said, handing her a glass of champagne. "Lu Shenyuan's here tonight." She didn't flinch. Let him be. Mo Chen studied her. "He's not going to let this go, Yichen." She took a sip of her drink, eyes scanning the grand ballroom. "Then he's wasting his time." Mo Chen sighed. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" She turned to him, her lips curving into a slow smile. "No." And she meant it. The past Shen Yichen had cared too much. The present Shen Yichen had no patience for ghosts. But just as she set her glass down, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Yichen?" The room seemed to hush as Lu Shenyuan approached, his sharp gaze locked onto her. She remained still, expression unreadable. "Mr. Lu." His jaw tightened at the title. Mo Chen immediately stepped closer, his presence protective. "Something you need, Lu Shenyuan?" Lu Shenyuan's eyes flicked toward him, cold and unwelcoming. "This doesn't concern you." Shen Yichen let out a soft chuckle. "Doesn't it?" His gaze snapped back to her. "We need to talk. Alone." "I don't think we do." His fingers curled at his sides. "Yichen." Her expression remained calm, indifferent. "The last time I checked, I was no longer your wife. Whatever you want to say, I'm not interested." The words hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't acting. She truly didn't care, and that terrified him more than anything. A dangerous game. Lu Shenyuan couldn't sleep. His world was unraveling, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. His thoughts were consumed by her, by the way she no longer looked at him with longing, by the way she smiled so easily for someone else. His fingers trembled as he poured himself another drink. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She was supposed to hurt after losing him. She was supposed to struggle. Instead, he was the one drowning. His mind raced, desperate, searching for a way to reclaim what had been his. And then, an idea took root. If she wouldn't come back willingly, then he would make her. Even if it meant crossing a line. Even if it meant breaking her world apart. And with that thought, his descent into madness began. The final battle for freedom. A night of reckoning. Shen Yichen stood by the window. the cold night breeze lifting strands of her hair. How had everything changed so drastically? Just months ago, she had been trapped in a loveless marriage, begging for the slightest hint of affection. Now she was free, successful, admired, and standing on her own 2 feet. But freedom came at a cost. Because Lu Shenyuan had gone mad. He had tried everything, showing up uninvited, meddling in her business, intimidating Mo Chen. Each time she turned away, his obsession deepened. And now he had done something unforgivable. Her phone buzzed. Mo Chen, Yichen, he's gone too far this time. Her hands clenched. She knew what this meant. Lu Shenyuan wasn't just interfering anymore. He was trying to ruin her, a desperate man's move. In a dark office, Lu Shenyuan sat alone, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk. Reports lay scattered in front of him. Shen Yichen's business deals, ones that were suddenly falling through. Investors who were mysteriously pulling out. He had made sure of it. If she wouldn't come back to him willingly, then he would make her need him again. He had destroyed careers before. This wouldn't be any different. Except it was. Because this time his hands were shaking. Because this time he wasn't doing this out of strategy. He was doing it out of desperation, and he was losing her. And the thought was driving him insane. His phone rang. Bai Yue. He didn't answer. She didn't matter anymore. Only Shen Yichen did. Confrontation. Shen Yichen stormed into Lu Shenyuan's office the next morning, slamming the door behind her. He was waiting, as if he had expected her. She threw a folder onto his desk. "You think you can control me like this?" He leaned back, watching her with unreadable eyes. "Business is ruthless, Yichen. If you can't handle it, maybe you should reconsider your choices." Her blood boiled. "You're destroying everything I built." He smirked. "You built nothing without me." Her breath caught. That was it. That was who he truly was. A man who had never valued her. A man who had never wanted her to stand on her own. A man who would rather see her fall than accept that she no longer needed him. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "You're pathetic, Lu Shenyuan." His smirk faltered. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You want me to come back? You think this will make me desperate? Let me make something very clear. I would rather burn than ever need you again." Something snapped in his eyes. He stood abruptly, grabbing her wrist. "Yichen!" She yanked herself free. "Don't touch me!" For the first time, his mask cracked. For the first time, he looked afraid, because he finally understood. She wasn't coming back. Ever. A man left in ruins. Lu Shenyuan sat alone in his office after she left. The silence was unbearable. He had power, money, everything he had ever wanted. But he had lost her. And in losing her, he had lost himself. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. There was only one thought in his mind. She was gone. And for the first time in his life, he understood what true regret felt like. A new beginning. Shen Yishen walked into Mo Chen's apartment, exhaling shakily. Mo Chen studied her carefully. "You okay?" She nodded. Yes. And this time, she meant it. For the first time, she was truly free. Lu Shenyuan had tried to break her, but she had won. and she would never look back. He had let her go, thinking she would never leave. Now, she had walked away forever, and he was the one left in ruins.